My father came from Poland after Balfour Declaration, 1919, and he was a graduate of a Polytechnicum from Warsaw. My mother was a graduate of Gimnasia Tarbut from Warsaw, and she was a Hebrew teacher. They both met in Israel, in Palestine, when she taught my father Hebrew. And they got married there, and I was born, naturally. I grew up in Jerusalem. I went to nursery school, kindergarten, and high school. There were not too many high schools in Palestine in those days. There were about 2 or 3. One in Haifa, one in Tel Aviv, and one in Jerusalem. And I got my matriculation in I graduated in 1941, but because of Palmach, I got matriculation only in 1942. I married Shoshana in 1946, and my son was born in 1947. I joined the Haganah when I was 14, and then I decided to join the Palmach, and I didn't go to the British Army. The war broke out in 1939. Some of my graduates decided to join the British Army. At that time, the British Army didn't take Jews fighting units, but service unit in the army. It was only later on when they created the Jewish Brigade. And I went to Palmach because I thought that we should build our own military organization. So that's a story of that period of time. I fought during the War of Independence. Well, before that, for 6 years, I was commissioned as an officer in 1943 in the Haganah Officers School. We didn't have ranks at that time. We just named the people as a section commander, platoon commander, company commander. That was the name. Ranks were introduced only when the Israeli army was established after the establishment of the state, when the British left in 48, May 48. And I served as a company commander out of 8 companies of Palmach in the Valley of Israel. And then I was moved to Jerusalem area, where I served as commander of the 8th Palmach company. We had already reserves of Palmach graduates of 3 years service, so I had a unit which was quite big. We all were stationed in kibbutzim, because we were an underground unit, certainly. And in kibbutzim around Jerusalem, 4 or 5 kibbutzim, and the Jerusalem Reserves Unit, which became later, when the war broke out after November 29, 47, they turned into the 6th Palmach Battalion. So we had already battalions at that time. When I say that time, it was December 1947 or January 1948. Later on in April, 3 battalions became a brigade. The Harel Brigade was the 4th, 5th, and 6th Palmach battalions, and the first commander of the brigade was late Yitzhak Rabin. And I joined, certainly naturally, I joined the 6th Palmach battalion, which was the Jerusalem battalion. I joined as the second in command of the battalion commander, and then certainly went on. The war broke out, and I went in September 48. I joined the Southern Front. I left the brigade in Jerusalem, and I was deputy to Yitzhak Rabin, who was chief operation of Southern Front. Yigal Alon, the commander of the Southern Front. And we fought the Egyptians, and then towards the beginning of 49, I replaced Yitzhak Rabin as operation officer of the Southern Front under the command of Yigal Allon and then Moshe Dayan. There were challenges of the war itself and my involvement in the war, both in Jerusalem area. I was involved in finding a detour way to Jerusalem, which was named Burma Road, and me and another officer of the Palmach RL Brigade. This was kind of a thing, but this is part of it because the war lasted more than a year, including the Southern Front, almost a year and a half. Then, during the Southern Front itself, and in planning and execution and involvement, and we fought the Egyptians, we drove them out. And it was not an easy war, but very satisfactory. When you look back, and we know exactly other things that it was a miracle, but the training area of my company, when I was company commander of the 8th Palmach Company, was in the area of west-south of Jerusalem, near Latrun area, and there were 2 Jewish settlements in that place. And we knew the area very, very well. When the Arab Legion, the Jordan army, took Latrun, in a way they cut Jerusalem from the rest of the country. And then Jerusalem was under the siege periodically up to a full siege. Can you imagine 100,000 people without water, without supplies, stuck in Jerusalem? And it was I would say, very tough time. And we failed in taking Latrun, opening the road. The 7th Army Brigade didn't do that. But we came with the idea that we can find a route, which we did. We knew the area. So for us, it was not a miracle. We just did it. And we connected Jerusalem to that trail. And it was a trail for jeeps only, but can you imagine the first, when we broke the road, it was not a road, it was tough. We brought to Jerusalem about 6 tons of ammunition and medical supplies per night. And for a period of 2 weeks, we broke the siege in a way. While doing that, we laid a pipeline to provide water to Jerusalem, and the engineers built this route, which was called Route 7 for the 7th Brigade, that enabled trucks to go to Jerusalem. So I would say that politically we created a different situation, and practically we lifted the siege. My studies were interrupted at Technion in November 47, and the army sent me to study. They wanted me to stay in the army, so they let me go. I went to MIT. And at MIT, I got my bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering, and I returned home in 1953. And I established the Department of Weapons Development. Then I became Chief Ordnance Israeli Army. Then I joined Professor Ephraim Kotzir, who was president of the state later, and we established the Chief Scientist Division, department, let's call it, of the Defense, Ministry of Defense and the Israeli Army. Then I became Chief Logistics of the Israeli Army, where I served for more than 4 years. And then I became Chief Scientist of Defense. With Professor Kotzir, I was Deputy Chief Scientist. In the Army, Chief Ordnance, I tried to solve the problem of embargo, which meant that in spite of the fact that we were granted by the UN the right to establish a Jewish state, and the Palestinian to establish an Arab state. The name Palestinian wasn't mentioned in this kind of decision, but we were not given, in a way, the means to establish a state military-wise. We couldn't buy either ammunition or weapons any place directly. I mean, as a sovereign country already, we couldn't buy it. And the Arab countries around us had the ability to buy whatever they wanted. And this was a trauma, at least for the state, and certainly myself too, because we were terribly poor. I mean, can you imagine at a certain stage of the war in Jerusalem, on the siege, we had 20 rounds to a rifle. I mean, something unbelievable. So this directed me as chief ordnance at that time, because the only thing we could purchase after the state was established, surplus equipment, and turn it into fighting weapons, like tanks and guns and things like that. And I was very much involved in that. I was chief ordnance from 1954 to 1962. And I turned the Ordnance Corps into something very strong, very big, with capabilities, with industrial capability. And we did solve the problem with this kind of junk dealing and turning them into artillery pieces and tanks and whatever. I'm very proud on the ability to turn Sherman tanks into fighting vehicles with different guns and different engines and different controls, and building up the armor corps. In 1973, October 1st, I left the army and I became president of Technion. I came to Technion on October 1st, and the Yom Kippur War broke out on October 6th, and I returned to the war, and I returned to Technion only in November. And then it was a very difficult time. Can you imagine that Technion didn't operate really for half a year. It was very difficult. Students were doing duties on reserve duty for a few months, and we tried to cope. It's only after 6 months that we returned to full operation. We have tried to do a lot of things. For example, we started to videotape courses and sent the videos to centers along the border lines, try to enable students to study according with the video. We found out later that you have to do it professional, which we did later. We established the study centers to solve problem of reserve, because when a student went on the reserve for a few weeks and returned, and he could pick up the video of a course which he missed, and in that center he could cover the courses which he didn't take fully, which helped students. Students told me later that they said, "Amos, you don't know, but we have done Technion to this center." So there were things, we coped with it. And you can imagine that after Yom Kippur War, the economy of the country, the war cost almost a total of gross domestic product, if not more than that. And the support of the country to development, many of the matching funds didn't operate anymore. And but we did. I coped with that, and we developed Technion. There were a lot of things. First of all, to bring all departments from the old campus to the Technion campus on the Dar Carmel, on the mountain. Because the Technion was split before between the old campus, which was built downtown Haifa, and what we started on Mount Carmel. And I've done it. I brought everything up. Well, we had some problems with the Department of Architecture, but they claimed that they have to be in the downtown. But finally, everybody was on. And we increased the construction. During that time, we have doubled the built-up area. We started to build dormitories in large scale, which finally, today I would say that there are place for 4,000 students, and different kind of dormitories. And the medical school and many of research centers. And I don't put the list of things that we have done, but it was a very fruitful kind of a period. Not easy. And I enjoyed it. There is something I learned in the army, is to work long hours. And time, you know that I didn't have a home in Haifa. I lived in Ramat HaSharon, and I used to drive an hour every day, getting to Technion at about 8 o'clock in the morning and leaving 9 o'clock at night. And this was my routine. I had a room with the students' dormitories. If I had to stay, I had a room. I didn't stay in a hotel. We have done a lot of good things. One of the things that I'm very proud of is the swimming pool. It's the best swimming pool in the country. And when I said that faculty and students should meet themselves naked, something like that. And a lot of other things we have done it. And I went into details. I knew everything, and I enjoyed it. Look, Technion in time, it was recognized a good school many years ago. I mean, the Technion graduates were preferred all over. And Technion sent the faculty to get their PhD outside at MIT and then Caltech and other places in Europe too. And our connection with the university all over. And the academic committee of the Board of Governors had a lot of faculty from MIT. Chairman was Asher Shapira, professor of MIT, and other. I mean, in 1950, the president of Technion was the chief of staff, past chief of staff of the Israeli army, Yaakov Dori. And until then, Technion followed the German-style university, and he moved it into American Ivy League university. This was one of the most important things that was done, because their German Technische Hochschule way of conducting studies and research didn't fit to the Israeli nature. So this was something very important, I think. It turned Technion, and the relationship with the United States universities and Institute of Technology grew up with time. And when you look back, when you get the Nobel Prize laureates of Technion, they started 30 years ago, Technion. I mean, they are a result of Israeli high school education, Technion education. Meanwhile, if in 1947 there were two academic institutes, Hebrew University and Technion. Technion preceded the Hebrew University a few months, although the idea of Technion preceded many more years before. It was the first conceived Institute of Higher Learning and Technology. Hebrew University came later. But anyway, there were two universities. Total number of students was about the same, 750 or 1,500 students total. And this was. And then after the state was established, little by little it grew. And competition started, which is very good. So today we have 7 research universities and colleges. The total number of students, including colleges today, is about 300,000. So you can imagine, there were no colleges in 1947 with 1,500 students, and what we are talking now today. And Technion itself is about 13,000 students. It doesn't have to grow beyond that. There are larger universities like Tel Aviv University and Hebrew University, but we are the only institute of technology in Israel, and certainly we are short of engineers. If I would say that the thing that affect the growth of our industry is trained technologists, engineers, and technicians, and practical engineers. And this is something that we have to cope with, because lack of enough graduates of high school level that come with sufficient mathematics and physics and chemistry and English to be able to cope and study Technion. I don't think Technion should increase in size, maybe should find another way of increasing number. All the technologies came from Technion. This was the first time I met with this university, and there was no other institute that could provide me with excellence. And I must say that the training they got at Technion was outstanding, because we never relied on outside experience. Never. Even if we could, but we couldn't. They didn't come. We have done it alone with Israeli brain. And this was quite something, because I sent tens and tens of soldiers to study at Technion, and I ended up with, I think, close to probably more than 150 engineers in my corps, covering all areas requiring for the defense, which I did. I built plants, and we supported the industry in order to go into that area to provide us with the means that we needed. I think that the involvement in New York, it's almost like kind of deserving a medal from the Technology Institute here in the United States. If we small Israel from Haifa, from Mount Carmel, competing and doing it. It has to do with the startup book, Startup Nation and other, but we are probably very good. I mean, you can't lie in that area. We have proved but it's a responsible move, because we can't fail, and we are going to succeed. China is a different story. The Chinese came to us, and it's a different environment, a different, I would say, culture. But when you look at the world, and things changed, the relationship with the United States is one thing. Relationship with Europe is a different thing. And our independence economically. And moving towards East, which I would include India and China, is important for us. Is important. Because the world is so unstable. And we need a stability. So the world should have weight on both sides. And I think it was a smart move. Certainly, at a certain point, we must realize that we could swallow so much. We are small, and be careful about that. And realize how much we can do and not try to do beyond our capabilities. But whatever we do, we can't fail. I received the Defense Prize for my life contribution to defense, both along the way, because later on, if I was chairman of the board of Rafael. This was after Technion. I was involved in that. I was, as I told you, chief scientist. And Rafael was a large organization and responsible, for example, to develop of Iron Dome and other things. So I was with Rafael both as chairman of the advisory committee and then chairman of the board for 9 years. So I was involved in defense very much, and I knew everything. But I was involved in other issues too. And if you ask me, I'm very proud about Technion. This was a wonderful time for me. Excellence is a way of life. Excellence not only in engineers and scientists, but technicians and others. It's a way of doing things. And if you ask me what the future is, depends on how well we'll be able to increase the level of excellence of the State of Israel in all levels. The other thing is that we realize the issue of interdisciplinary. I mean, you have to destroy the Chinese walls. Everything should be looked as a system. And the higher you get, you find that people get together scientifically. I mean, we all meet someplace. So this is an approach that has to be done gradually the way we can do it. I mean, we have to do, if you ask me. We have to be able to train larger number because our development depends on the supply of trained people in all professions. And it has to do with the education, with the high school education, and maybe even trying to start with nursery school. So this is something they have to do. We have to grow up number-wise. That's a different question, but it has to do politically with the issue that will be a Jewish state only if will be the majority. Otherwise, we won't stay a Jewish state. And this is a issue that has to be tackled even politically. Even politically. I'm touching on the question of two states and other ways of making sure that we are a Jewish state. And it's an issue of demography. But the issue of education level make us or break us. Education is one of the most important things that we have to get involved in it. And thanks God that Technion succeeded with time to maintain excellence, push it upward and upward. We are a great school. The involvement of American Jewry with Technium. And it's something that, if you read the history, we were saved twice by a great philanthropist, Jacob Schiff. When Technium was conceived later on the way to build the building and other things, we got the best, I would say the largest donation from a Russian Jew, tea merchant, which was equivalent to $50,000. And we didn't realize at that time how much it would cost, so we got to the point that we couldn't continue. And Jacob Schiff, who visited Palestine in 1908 and was very much interested, he gave us $100,000 at that time. Can you imagine that time? But he had a few conditions. One of them, that Technion should not be named Vysotsky Institute of Technology. So it was done, no Vysotsky. Only the second one, which is important, very important, the independence of Technion. Independence intellectually, academically. He insisted on it. And there was some other things, but it doesn't matter. But this was, can you imagine, before the building was built in the area. The second time was after the Great War. Certainly we started to teach only in 1924, after the war. And there was the involvement of the German community, Jewish community, Hilfsverein, Jewish Hilfsverein. And they went bankrupt, and they wanted to sell the property of Technion. The building was built. It started in 1912. And Jacob Schiff bought it and gave it to the Zionist organization. So here, I'm taking only the American involvement. Then there were organizations within the Zionist organization of engineers and whatever, but they had an outstanding plan. They wanted to build a town of, not a town, but settle 100,000 Jews and whatever it is. They didn't do nothing. It was only in 1940 that the American Technion Society started to crystallize. 41, there was already chapters, and since then it grew up. And I would say that without the support of the American Technion Society, we wouldn't have reached what we have at Technion today. And you just go and see the names all over. And the academic support. So they are more than partners. Now go back to 1908 and think about it.